Welcome to the Capstone Conversation, the East Bay's best podcast. Hosted by Jared Ash, bringing you in depth conversations with the leaders shaping your community.
Today, we are going to be talking about how information in our local communities is changing, how to successfully follow what is happening in your city, as well as cities or special agencies around you, and cut through all of the news, cut through all of the social media, and just understand what is happening within each community. I am joined by a friend, Jonathan Bash with Locunity. Jonathan, welcome. Thanks for joining me. Tell us a little bit more about Locunity and your background and where you got the name.
Jonathan Bash, CEO of Locunity. Thanks for having me, Jared. Great podcast. It's such a great service for the community and all the stakeholders out there to know what's going on in the community. And you're a part of the solution. My background is public affairs, government relations, and communications around public health issues and other local government adjacent issues. My entire career, I've been working with elected officials, community organizers, leaders in nonprofits, academia, and the media to change policy for the better by bringing people into the system. And about 10 years ago, a private equity came into the Bay Area, purchased the East Bay Times, then the Contra Costa Times, Oakland Tribune, the Mercury, by now, pretty much every newspaper in the Bay Area. And the number of journalists was downsized from basically, let's say 100 down to about 15. And that downsizing led to a crisis in the local information ecosystem where folks didn't know where to turn for quality information on what's happening in their city councils, school boards, board of supervisors, and the hundreds of special districts that are across the Bay Area. About 5 years ago, during the pandemic, I became hyper-focused on how do I solve this for Contra Costa County? And started a Substack where I would monitor our board of supervisors, our 19 city councils, and wrote up a very long kind of Politico-style newsletter. Had about 250 readers in Contra Costa County. For about 6 months, tried to solve the issue, but it made $5,000 a year, which is not a full salary. With some investment, maybe we could have scaled that, but it just wasn't very efficient and not the right systemic wide solution that could solve the problem. About 2 years ago, when LLMs were really getting to the level of quality where you could say, okay, maybe we could mine some of this information and turn it into something useful for people. And about a year ago, I made the commitment of I'm going to quit my job and really focus on solving this issue. And luckily found my co-founder, Dave Iyer, who's originally a engineering leader and product leader at Twitch, the live streaming company, who also had a similar hyper focus of covering San Francisco Board of Supervisors meetings using AI. And we joined forces. What started as basically a newsletter has evolved into a platform for getting government relations, community organizing, and media work done by using AI to provide the right information to the right people at the right time. The way our technology works is we transcribe every public meeting by downloading the videos. We ingest agendas from those meetings before the meetings happen. And we turn that into structured data that can power alerts, roundups, briefings, and reports after every meeting that anyone can be in any room at any time and know when they need to show up and organize their neighbors to take action.
I like your story, how you talk about the changing media and you're trying to be that voice. And I think we've had some episodes with Dan Ashley from ABC7, Nolan Higdon, who studies the media as a professor at CSU East Bay, who lives in Contra Costa too. And they were both talking about how there's less people on the ground. And the people who are following things, by the time you get to next door, which is a very localized platform, the information, it's like a game of telephone with when you're kids, and it gets distorted. You're providing, here is actually what happened, who said this and voted this way. Expand on that.
We're able to tie every finding and statement and quote directly back to the actual source material, which is the ground truth of what happened in the meeting according to the video of what everyone said in the meeting. We can tell you who said what their background is based on our own context database that we've built, and prove that this is actually what people said and outline how we arrived at what it means, particularly by bringing in the input of the community, which meetings are great for this. We have a public comment period. You get to hear both sides of an issue by default, usually, assuming people know the meeting's happening. And you get both perspectives, plus the neutral city staff perspective, plus the elected officials' perspective. That's a lot of great data on how people are thinking about an issue and who they represent when they are showing up. That combined with our proof of where it came from that anyone can access. Someone signs up for our newsletter for their city council, which is free for anyone. They get their newsletter, but they also get access to a video there. You can click on the agenda, watch it, see that they actually said it. If you want to screenshot and post on Nextdoor with your own information or opinion on what happened, you can. But that ground truth of what actually happened, according to the video, is there.
I think that's important that you're talking about, right? It's a summary of something that's real, but you're also keeping it simplified because some of these hearings go 6 to 8 hours. I think that's important, how you're helping summarize that, but you're pointing people back to.
Right. And the next step we take for organizations who partner with us, the newsrooms, the folks who actually have to show up to these meetings and then report what happens or act on what happens, we use our AI to also identify what's relevant to your beat or your focus as a policy. If you are the health reporter, you can set it up so you get your own roundup of all the public health policy decisions in the Bay Area, for example. And then it prioritizes it for you so that you can say, oh, these are the 3 that might be a good story to pitch my editor. I'm going to go with this one. And you can deep dive into the information using our transcripts and data and all the documents that are public and turn that into something really useful really quickly, where that would have been something that would rely on a source flagging it for you or it lighting up on a Nextdoor or Facebook group. But those are inherently biased. It's not a representative of exactly what may actually really matter to the community. It's what a handful of people thought came out of that meeting. But brings more information out to the top while also helping people focus on what really matters for what they're trying to do, which makes it possible for them to do more news, to do more advocacy, to do more good work in the community, without wasting time sitting through those 8-hour meetings and maybe not even getting one story out of it.
I think that's an important message too, not just about the product, but when you talk to journalists, they say they're always looking for content. They don't want just everybody's pitch idea. They're looking for something, like you said, like that health reporter. They can't manage in Alameda, Contra Costa, and Solano counties. There's more than 50 jurisdictions and government agencies. Who else also talks about health? Water districts.
Yep.
Wastewater. They can help manage health related to all these things. All of that gets synthesized and flagged, making that reporter more efficient at tracking all of that and summarizing, like, hey, here are the threads. Here's 3 threads in a month that I want to pull on to find those stories.
Exactly. And that's just something that wouldn't have happened before. You would have relied on a health advocacy organization to call you, or you would have relied on an oil company or a soda company or someone who's on the other side of the issue to show up and call you. But now you can just find it naturally, organically, when you need to know. And that can be really transformative for the information ecosystem. Not only can the residents find out what's happening for themselves using what we're offering or what others are offering, but also they have access to better journalism because the journalists now have essentially a fleet of researchers working for them instead of one person just grinding out one story a week potentially.
How is this being utilized? I want to keep expanding on this topic of changing journalism because I think that's important.
Yep.
Could you just maybe expand on your vision for how this talks about that? You're talking a lot about truth, fact, but maybe expand on that shifting media narrative a little bit.
I think with the implementation of large language models over the next few years, and unfortunately the decline in clicks to news websites, and also the decline of use of social media, there is a trend of younger generations not wanting to participate in social media. Our previous information paradigm's totally going to change in the next 5 years. We're going to lose a lot of more journalism. We're going to potentially see a decline in social media participation. And I think we're eventually going to see a revert back to more in-person events and opportunities to build community, which is all very good. For the information ecosystem, that also means we're going to be in our own silos, potentially, but also be exposed to more information since we will have these AI agents going out there and finding us information we care about. You can get a preview of this by logging onto a ChatGPT or a Claude and asking what happened in the Bay Area in X news, just whatever news. And it'll go out and find it, bring it back to you. And that's kind of going to be the new model of how information gets to you, which has pros and cons. It further departs from the old great days of Walter Cronkite and a shared reality. But it also means potentially there's less of that. There's Fox and MSNBC. Now there is a spectrum, and everyone's kind of participating in that spectrum.
I know monitoring social media attendance isn't your expertise, but I'm curious, what do you know about that downward trend of social media? I actually find that relieving and yet shocking just to hear.
Some people have a theory called the dead internet theory, and this is where a majority of accounts on social media are likely to be AI bots, or maybe not even AI, just like a programmatic old-fashioned computer bot. And you can see this. It comes in waves as Meta tests their models. A year or two ago, you might have seen Shrimp Jesus on Facebook. If you don't know what Shrimp Jesus is, you might want to Google it. It's hilarious. But there was a period where Facebook was all artificial intelligence generated images of impossible things. Now it's getting more insidious, where it's more content that looks real. And I think at a certain point, when it's very clear to everyone that the majority is AI versus human, that's where people will just gradually stop checking as often. I don't really check Facebook unless I posted something and then I just want to see how it went. But I'm not really getting real good content on there anymore. Instagram's a little better, TikTok's a little better, but they've all declined from the glory days of when I was in college, where you could create an event on Facebook, get 100 people to show up and hang out. Or it would just be a live stream of like everyone, all the fun things people are doing. This is what it was social. And we've departed far from the social aspect. It's now parasocial. It is celebrities and their fans, or it's AI and the people who think they're real following them. And I think it'll hit a tipping point, and it's starting more with whatever we call it, Gen Alpha or Gen Z, where there is a market decline in the statistics of usage. There is a higher usage of AI, and unfortunately a trend of teenagers talking to AI partners who are basically girlfriends and boyfriends. And that's a whole nother issue that we need to push back.
We'll leave that one for the mental
Let's
health.
try to go more towards
podcast
the real
episodes
human
we
connection
do.
as the pushback to this decline in social.
Fascinating. I stopped at a certain point checking Facebook or regularly. And in fact, my wife's like, I sent you 3 messages on Instagram. Oh, and what's my Instagram account? And it
We schedule
was,
bi-weekly check-ins, by the way, to watch each other's messages that we sent each other since it's 20 or 30 videos. We are using social media, it looks like, but it's a different experience than it used to be.
yeah, but I remember when I first moved to San Francisco, I don't know, 16, 17 years ago, everybody I met, I invited them to a happy hour. And every couple of weeks, I would have a happy hour. Friday, I'm meeting here. And I did post that on Facebook, and it was really good. I can't tell you now I have young kids. The people who are most in my daily life, though, today are kids on their swim team and their parents who are involved in their school, different schools, all those parents. And I don't think any of them are on social media with me in any regard. I will say I'm on LinkedIn for work purposes 3 to 5 times a day, but in short intervals. What you're talking about is just important because one of the things I really wanted to cover on this episode is just how are we changing how we communicate in this technologically driven world? You've done a good job of just pointing that out and stirring growth on the conversation.
Thank you. It's been a challenge. A year ago, no one understood what I was talking about. Our messaging has changed, and I think the greater understanding in society has changed as well.
Let's look at your company as an AI tech startup. How fast are you growing? You talked about starting in Contra Costa and San Francisco. How quickly are you bringing on, and you're covering every jurisdiction. You're covering 5 water districts and BART and county and all these cities, et cetera, transportation agencies. Talk through, how do you expand into additional geographies? How rapidly your tech is changing?
There is a cost to obviously generating this. AI tokens are going down in price, but they might go back up. It's a weird market. That's a whole nother conversation on whether it's a sustainable market. But in the short term, we are being very responsible and sustainable. We find clients who need geography. We turn on that geography, then that makes it available to more folks. If we were to get a huge grant or a huge investment, we could expand faster. But for every meeting, we have to process a lot of data. Right now, we are in about 120 jurisdictions in the Bay Area. We have Contra Costa, Alameda, Solano, San Mateo, and San Francisco, as well as the major regional overlapping jurisdictions like BART and the Air District. We're also in Louisville, Kentucky, since randomly they heard about it and a city council member there thought it would be really useful for their city. It's word of mouth, it's gradual, but at some point it will be all at once when there is a critical mass. We just need one very large client who can afford all of California, and then we can turn that on for everyone. Ultimately, our strategy is to get to all 90,000 jurisdictions in America and beyond, potentially. We're starting to get requests for coverage of United Nations meetings. And if that becomes a line of business, then we also will be covering the European Union and beyond. This could become a pretty amazing data center and also a great way for people to get all kinds of news, not just what's happening in their own city, but also make international relations more digestible, since no one understands what the heck's going on there. More data, more access. I think we'll have better outcomes as our leaders have more information at their fingertips, as our communities have access. And together, that will lead to better policy outcomes.
I want to talk about the data use and the energy use.
Yeah.
And data centers. I know you're not in the data center business, but you're using a lot of data, which pulls a lot of energy. And there was an interview maybe even a year ago from Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, ChatGPT's parent company. And one of the things he said was, stop saying please and thank you, because that actually takes a lot of and bandwidth. And if everybody keeps doing that, it's the equivalent of a light bulb for an hour. And I thought that was interesting. And there's a lot of talk about data centers. Now, I'll add as an aside, I do say please and thank you to ChatGPT in case OpenAI ever becomes the Skynet of the world. I want to be on its good side. But talk about just the use of data, the power. What do you know? How does that, from a business owner's perspective, in the space that you are, don't solve a problem, just talk about how it impacts you and your business and what you need and your customers need.
I think it's a short-term problem. There are many resources driving into renewable energy to support this build out. And unfortunately, in the short term, it does seem to be defaulting potentially to diesel and gas and coal or whatever's available now. I think in 5 years, we will have figured it out and this will be less of an issue. But right now, the way I think of it is trying to make every system the most efficient possible without losing quality, at least from our perspective. If we can use a cheaper model, which uses less energy, we do that. But if it leads to more errors, less trusts, problems for democracy, we're not going to use the cheaper model. I think the benefits outweigh the loss. And there are other organizations monitoring these meetings. They use very cheap models, in my opinion, not particularly useful information and more error prone. We do really stand by using more modern models. I will say the amount of energy our system would be using, what I've heard is compared to, even if we were to build out all 90,000 jurisdictions, we're talking about a couple refrigerators potentially running, which they're not super efficient, but it's not catastrophic in the long run, is how I think about it. And then on the water issue, a lot of folks have concerns about the usage of water. There are a few solutions that could start bubbling up, like waterborne data centers. There's a ship in Stockton, for example. It's a data center on a barge, and there's only one in the world. It's in Stockton. It's right down the street, basically, for us. And instead of using water flows through it, and it only changes the temperature of the water like a quarter of a degree. It doesn't lead to evaporation. And that could be a solution. We have a lot of coastline, and all you need to do is just put a boat on and run a power line into it. If we solve the power issue, that solves the water issue. We can get to a point where this is renewable and has very minimal output or impact on the environment. And if you talk to a Sam Altman, they're going to say all this AI is also going to lead to faster development of renewable energy, other solutions. We could debate whether it will actually go that well, but there is some validity. Just as a founder who's using AI, we are moving a lot faster in this particular realm we're working in, and that applies to every realm since it's a general purpose technology.
I think that was really just good to get a perspective. I want to talk a little bit about your experience as a tech startup here in the East Bay. You're not in Silicon Valley. I guess your partner might be in San Francisco. You're here in the East Bay. Just talk about, you had this idea, you wrote a business plan. How have you gone about and raised capital, launched your business, get your first customers? Take a few minutes. Tell us about your journey here.
We don't do business plans in startups. I'm sad to report. You're meant to test and iterate and experiment and move fast. A business plan.
Fail fast is what John Doerr said.
And I did those first 6 months. But now we found our stride. We primarily raise from angel investors. We have a really great team of investors. Some of them you can see on our website. But Lenny Mendoza, who used to be the McKinsey partner in charge of government and the chief economic advisor to Governor Newsom, has a nice angel group that's really focused on saving local journalism and civic technology. He and his friend Rich Klein own the Coastside News Group, which is a newspaper in San Mateo County. And they were really interested in how do we make civic journalism possible with our limited budget. And that's why they came in as an investor. We also partnered with the Safe AI Fund. This is Jeff Ralston's vehicle. He's the guy who created Yahoo Email, eventually was president of Y Combinator before Sam Altman or after Sam Altman. I'm not sure which, but now he's really focused on safe, ethical, responsible use of AI. One of the tenets is fighting misinformation and disinformation, and that's how we were funded through them. We're really looking for investors who are aligned on this mission, but also understanding that you need a sustainable business to solve this problem. I would have loved to be a nonprofit and serve the public good entirely, but there is not enough philanthropy to do this work on the scale we'd like to do it. And the timeline's much too short when we all know there's so much transformation happening in society right now. We have to move quickly. That's why we're a for-profit startup versus a nonprofit. But we do want to have that impact. We're partnering with foundations and nonprofits to execute on the journalistic side of things and the community benefit side of things. We are partnering with housing organizations in the Bay Area to secure funding for them to do pro-housing ads, for example. We're partnering with local nonprofit journalists and statewide nonprofit journalists who need the data and want to get it out more to the community and to other folks in their ecosystem. And through those partnerships, I think we'll bring in more funding, but also serve our mission of helping journalists and people on the ground in the community do the work.
Are there issues you found that put you at a disadvantage as a tech startup by being primarily based in the East Bay versus if you lived in Palo Alto, Menlo Park area? Or were you able to really overcome that in this virtual world and everything?
It would be a challenge if we were, I think, a typical startup creating developer tools for software companies. It's a small community. It's all really based in San Francisco, Palo Alto, Silicon Valley. We're not that deep into that world. We don't need to be there every day, and San Francisco is an hour away. It is a slight bit of friction. My co-founder's in San Francisco. He can represent us there. I'm in Contra Costa. We meet in the middle in Oakland and work there most of the time. But the nice thing about working in the East Bay is more affordable housing with BART, decent public transit, and a great network of folks who really care about the East Bay that's really been under-resourced. We're the forgotten stepchild to San Francisco. There's a lot of opportunity in the East Bay for economic development, and I know there is a startup movement building between the Diablo Valley Tech Initiative. There's a Innovate Bay in Fremont trying to build a deep tech ecosystem in Fremont. I think the dollars will start moving out here more over time, and it will be less of an issue. But it's a little bit easier. If you're in downtown San Francisco, you can just have coffee with anyone whenever. But in the scheme of things, it's not that much of a handicap, and we're still incredibly privileged versus if we were in another state that has no ecosystem and having to do this from scratch.
Who's a user base for the company? What are some of the different verticals? I know you talked about the reporters looking to use this, but who are some other types of avatars?
Our real focus right now is enterprise government relations teams, since they have the budgets and the hair on fire need to solve this problem. I think regional healthcare providers, large employers, utilities, those types of folks need to know what's happening in their communities so they can show up and represent. That's a huge vertical we're building out. We have a handful of those that are regional contracts that we'd like to make national contracts. As far as more in the impact realm, partnering with advocacy organizations in the community is a great way to get more people using the platform. Obviously, they have smaller budgets than your large Fortune 500 companies, but they love the product because it makes their lives much easier. For example, if you're a nonprofit that covers East Bay, Contra Costa, and Alameda County, you're monitoring 40 cities, a county, and how many commissions, all these special districts, plus all the community organizations and relationships you have to maintain within that sphere of influence. It's a lot to take on. Being able to log in and get a report on all the meetings happening next week, and that you only need to show up to 3 of them, is incredibly helpful versus having to manually every Friday evening when cities dump this data, going through 40 agendas hand by hand just to find the one little nugget you need to act on next week. That's big. And then journalism is my passion, but unfortunately they do not have the budget for this. Even if we basically provide it at cost, it's still a hard conversation. That's where we're really
Yeah.
hoping to partner with philanthropy. And larger nonprofits have a bit more flexibility to get it in the hands of smaller community nonprofit news outlets and newsrooms.
I laugh as you talk about the Friday afternoon at 5. There's one city that I get like a special internal report. It comes out Fridays at 5:15, 5:30, and I'm
Mhm.
like, maybe I read one out of every
Yep.
like 12. And
Yep.
I wonder if they do that on purpose too, or it's just the end of the week and they're trying to sum it up after everybody else
Yep.
leaves the building.
Those agendas are moving targets. Things pop up. Things need to be delayed. And then the meeting's on Tuesday. If you need to activate residents to show up, you got to find out Friday night. Now it's the weekend. It's kind of hard to get people to listen. And then it's Monday, and now you got to show up Tuesday. It's a very compressed timeline in these policy spaces.
Yeah.
We're also doing some research and doing some conversations to figure out other sources of data that can make this even an earlier signal. You can get more than just 3 days. That's still a question mark right now. We're exploring that. If anyone has ideas, I'm all ears. And we're integrating some legislative tracking tools as well. Some cities, usually the larger ones, have Legistar, which does track the introduction of an ordinance through the process, kind of like you would see for Congress or a state legislature. We've brought that in for San Francisco. Hopefully other cities can adopt a similar type of system that we can also show where things are in the process, since usually there's an introduction and first reading, a second reading,
Right.
potentially 5 different town halls, and then final votes. It can be a long multi-year process. It's kind of hard to just take Friday at night, just figure out what's happening next week.
Yeah. Jonathan, how do people find more about you and your company if they want to invest, if they want to subscribe and get more information? Just follow you.
We're at locunity.com. That's LOCUNITY.com. Think local community in unity, Locunity. But anyone can sign up. If you're in Contra Costa or any of our other service areas, you can get a weekly briefing on what's happening in your city council and board of supervisors. And if you're an organization, you can schedule a meeting with me and we can chat about how we can partner.
Jonathan Bash from Locunity, thank you for joining me on today's episode.
Thank you, Jared.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Capstone Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe and follow Jared Ash and Capstone Government Affairs on LinkedIn. Leave us a review and share this episode with a friend.